Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Season 2, where we are exploring our galactic origins and becoming multidimensional. I'm your host, Washela Sananda, and today I'm excited to introduce you to the delightful Andrew Martin. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Washela. I love that. Delightful. I'm going to put that on a business card or something.
I do find you delightful. I think the viewers will as well. We'll let them decide.
Yeah, that's up to them.
Right, right. Let me start by sharing a little bit about who you are, where you're coming from. So those that aren't familiar with you have a little bit of background on who
Sure.
they're talking to here. Andrew Martin is a highly attuned, energy intuitive, and personal transformation coach. A series of transcendent and clairaudient experiences beginning in 1995 and climaxing in 2012 left him suddenly awakened and on an accelerated path of expansion and evolution. His ability to take high-level, often abstract spiritual knowledge and make it practical and accessible is bringing revolutionary insight to the world. His humorous, compassionate, and down-to-earth approach assists people in creating powerful, lasting changes. His work is the catalyst for life-altering shifts and transformation. I love it. So,
I love that bio. Every time I hear that, a friend of mine wrote that for me years ago because was having a really difficult time condensing it. So every time I hear that read, I'm like, who is that? I don't know who they're talking about.
it's really special to have a bio. And, even I recommend for anyone that hasn't written their bio, even if you're not in, this type of work, write a bio for yourself. Like, what would people say about you? Because it does you live into it then, right? And you get to hear, oh, this is who I'm choosing to be in this
Totally.
life. Yeah.
Totally. And, we all have our own stories about who we are, and very seldom do those really line up with how other people perceive us. So when I first read that, I was like, wow, like that's what she really thinks of me. And that was not her flatter. And to hear someone perceive that, because I think you understand when we're on the side of this and our practice is just building and trying to figure out how to help and serve and connect with clients and all of that, we forget, it's like we're just in the mix. And so it's beautiful to hear. And I do hope that someday I can live up to her perception of me.
Own it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you are. So, because it's right there in that first paragraph, I really want to dive in and find out about these transcendent and clairaudient experiences beginning in 1995 and climaxing in 2012. What was happening?
That's a great question. I still don't entirely know, but I have some ideas. It's interesting. It's funny you asked that because I was just thinking about that this morning, how, if I look back in hindsight on my life, I sort of think of my spiritual awakening as a pot that was sort of slowly simmering my whole life. And you know how it is, the minute that you walk away from the pot that you're waiting to boil, what happens? It just overflows. So my whole life, I was kind of pushing this to the side. I didn't want to be any more different than I already was. I didn't want these, as interesting as and exciting as it was, it also made me feel like I stood out for reasons that I wasn't comfortable with. So, but anyway, fast forward to 1995, and I was living in Seattle at the time, and I had decided to meditate. At that point, I think the depths of my spiritual connections were Oprah and Chopra. So I watched Oprah and I read Deepak Chopra, and that was about as deep as I went. But I just decided to meditate one day, and I sat down and did what I thought you were supposed to do, crossed my legs. Immediately, my feet fell asleep, and I was like, this is really uncomfortable. I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do. I was just closing my eyes and breathing, and there was this moment where I was just taken out of myself. And just suddenly, which was probably honestly maybe a second and a half, but for that 1.5 seconds, it felt eternal and infinite. I was suddenly one with everything. I felt myself in the stars and the trees and the plants and the planet and all of it. And it was just this amazing, transcendent experience. Suddenly I was all of it. And then, of course, the mind came in and was like, oh my gosh, what is this? We have to shut this down right away. And so, it came sort of crashing back. And that was the first moment where I was consciously present with that experience of moving beyond the limitations of only seeing myself as human. And so beyond that moment, I, spent the next 3 or 4 years trying to just kind of explain it away. And, time goes by and you're like, oh, it wasn't really that big of a deal. I was just meditating. Well, then in 2005, I'm going to make this as short as I can. In 2005, had been living in New York for about 7 years. I was at the end of my rope. I was not happy. I was in debt. I had lost my apartment, like you name it. It was kind of happening in my life at that time. And I was really at the end of my rope. And one morning was just sitting in the office. My roommates had gone to work. And I was just sitting there and I just surrendered. I just broke. I said, I need help. I don't know what to do. And then out of nowhere, I heard a voice say, well, you do realize that it doesn't have to be this difficult. You can move back to Seattle if you want to, because I had lived in Seattle previously. And it was one of those moments of what the heck? I went upstairs. Is anyone home? Is the TV on? Looking outside, no one was there. Fast forward then again to 2012. I had sort of started down the path in 2005, decided I wasn't ready. 2012, I was in LA, same thing as in New York. I was at the end of my rope. I was in debt. I was unhappy. It was the same exact experience. So I decided to paint my apartment. What else do you do when your life is falling apart but redecorate? So I went into the bathroom, was painting the bathroom. As I put that roller on the last wall, I heard the same voice say, you do realize that as soon as you finish painting this wall, it's going to be time to leave, don't you? And that was it. That was it. At that moment, I said, okay, I don't know who you are, what you want, what you know, but clearly my way is not working. I backed out of the bathroom, sat down on the sofa, cried for about 20 minutes. And then I said, okay, I said, Spirit, I will do whatever you want. Just get me back to Seattle, get me a job, get me an apartment, get me a place to live, and I'll do whatever you want. And that's how it happened. There were a few other things along the way, but fast forward, here I am. So it was just that moment of finally saying, I give up. I don't know. I can't do it my way anymore. It just doesn't work.
Mm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the key element there was that surrender piece where, and unfortunately, or maybe it's a good thing, I don't know, but people sometimes have to be at their dark night of the soul or, hit the bottom before that surrender actually happens. And then when it does, the relief, I think the freedom that comes from it is really transformational.
Yeah.
And then you want more freedom and more of that voice.
Yeah. Then you get a taste of who you really are, and you get a taste of that true essence of the self. And man, then it's oh my gosh, everything else has just been rehearsal.
Yeah. And so was that the point where you started going to coaching, or was that later?
That was later, 2012 when I left, it was that day when I said, okay, I made the deal. And then literally about a month and a half later, I was back in Seattle with a job and an apartment. Everything just happened. And so for the first about year and a half, I was working my day job. I was in an office, and I was at the same time kind of working these gifts. I was working with my team. I was really consciously and deliberately developing and sort of resurrecting these connections that I believe we're all born with in some way. And then stepping into the practice was the end of 2013. And then coaching didn't really happen until 2016. When I started to move into something beyond just a single hour session. I was really craving something that was more long-term with somebody, a longer arc because I felt like in an hour, we just start to peel back the layer and then you're done and I may never see you again. So I really was craving something deeper, more transformational, to walk with people as a partner really in their journey for that period of time. And so it was 2016 that the coaching really started to take off.
Nice. And so you have a process called sphere healing. I'd love to hear about that. And when did that formulate for you, and how does it work, and what do you do with people?
The sphere healing is so cool. It's really, and I say this with all authenticity, it is a very humbling thing. And I preface that because, I'm humble. We talk a lot about being humble and humility in spiritual circles. And I can be honest and say that sometimes I say, oh, I'm humble, and I'm not. But really, I am very humbled by these sessions. And so the sphere healing is really what happens here is we open a space for you to essentially do a deep dive into your own energy field. These sessions really started to come online last fall. It was about November of 2019 when these things really started to open up. It became clear to me that at this point in my journey, I don't necessarily need to be in the mix. My job is to create the space so that people can just surrender to themselves and really be deeply held by all that they are. So in these sessions, it's the sphere. So we're looking simultaneously, we're working physical, mental, emotional. So we're working with the present incarnation. At the same time, we're calling in what I call the creator self. Some people would call it the higher self. We call in the creator self. So it is the creator self that's managing this process. So anything that comes in, anything that rearranges or realigns, anything that moves out is decided and managed by you at that level. So my job is sort of like the lifeguard. You know, I'm just there to make sure everyone's doing what they need to do and that everyone's safe and okay. Which really in the hands of the creator self, you always are. It's the mind that has those fears. And so a lot of what I do there is just to soothe the mind. But really what I find to be the most powerful thing is that so many of these people that I'm working with in these sphere healing sessions are similar to you in that they have a history, they have an understanding, they have a language of this spiritual stuff. And yet so many of them leave these sessions saying, wow, I thought I knew what connection was. I thought I knew what stillness was. I thought I knew what the depths of my being were, but I found a whole new level that I wasn't even aware was there. So my role here is to be as unobtrusive, as much out of the way as I can. I don't really say anything unless I'm prompted by you at that level. And so everything that comes through is from you, for you. And it's such a beautiful experience because here's the thing. In those sessions, you don't have to come with a list of problems. I don't have to show up with a list of solutions. So suddenly it's not about Shayla and her money problems, right? Because now we're in a space where you have problems with money. But if you just walk in the door and say, I am free from expectation, I trust myself completely, and that is what I give my authority to in this moment, to make these decisions for me, that's when the real stuff starts happening, because who better knows what you're ready for than you at that level?
Yeah, beautiful. And so, so that voice that you heard, is that directing you during this, or are you, tell me about that. Is that what you would call your creator self or higher self? And is that kind of how you knew how to do this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's kind of a combination of both. When I'm in those sphere healing sessions, my intention is always to surrender to the will of the person that I'm working with, right? Because you're the one that's coming for whatever is here for you. It has nothing to do with me. So I do my best to get out of the way. So what I always set the intention before is to say, okay, well, Shayla, I'm connecting with you at that highest level and I take my cues from you. So if you want it to be your direction coming through, that's what I'll send. If you want it to be my offerings, that's what I'll send. And so I just arrive as empty as possible. And then it is oftentimes something that comes from you at that level. What I find is that most of the direction is happening with you internally. I'm just kind of observing and maybe giving little nudges or little prompts to push you or guide you in a certain direction. But I'm only ever directing from you, either as you saying directly and I transmit that, or you saying, I don't care, you tell her what you want to tell. So it really kind of depends. And that's what's so fascinating to me is the unique personality that each creator self has. And it's so palpable and so apparent when I'm in that space. It's really, really fascinating. So to answer your question, long story short point, it's both. It's both.
I get that. I used to do what I guess we would call psychic readings for people. And I think it's a similar process where, I'm clearing out my mind. I think anytime you're doing any energy work or readings or whatever it is, to get out of your human mind and access the higher mind, which is we're all connected through, because at the highest level, we're all the same one.
Right.
And then to be able to bring through that information that's going to serve the highest good. So that's really powerful. And then do people have healing experiences from that? What are some of the transformations that people experience?
I've had a couple of people who had chronic pain that was suddenly gone. I've had people who have had these moments of just like finally meeting that part of themselves that has been sort of running that resistance narrative, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, it hasn't been you, it's been me when I was 6 years old and I had this weird moment and I accepted this belief that never really resonated, so it really is getting to the root of whatever is present. So sometimes it's a physical shift, sometimes it's an emotional shift, sometimes it's a mental shift, which to me is a shift in belief. When we're talking about the mental plane, to me that's always belief. So it's sometimes a shift in belief, and that to me is the most revolutionary thing. Like, yeah, it's beautiful to suddenly have your shoulder not be in pain anymore, and certainly there's space for that, but to me the most amazing thing is the release of emotional pain or the release of psychic or energetic pain. And it's often one of those things that people don't even realize it was there until it's gone. They're like, oh my, it's like if you have a refrigerator running in the background that's really, really loud, you just get used to it and you don't realize how loud it is till you unplug it and you go, oh my God, it's so much quieter without that. So it's kind of everything, physical, mental, and emotional is what will occur. And again, it's really whatever it's time for them to experience.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing about that. So I feel like that gives me and everyone else like a sense of, what you're working with and how you're working. And I love talking to people that do healing work and just about their perspective of, where it comes from and how everybody's got their own kind of relationship with it, even though I believe, at the highest level, it's all from the same
Yeah.
source.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what
I
else
think
do
of
you?
it. Yeah, I think of it like food. If I'm hungry, I can go to 10 people can make me an amazing meal. Well, I might not like 7 of those meals. They just aren't my taste, right? But I'm still fed, right? I still get what I need. And I think that that's it. And, essentially people ask me what I do. Really, when it comes down to it, my job is just to help people remember. That's it.
Mm.
Remember who you already are. Remember the truth that you were born with. Because once you tap into that, you don't need me anymore.
Yes,
And that's my ultimate
exactly.
goal, right? To
Exactly.
get you to the point where you don't need me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that conversation about, and I think that is the goal, is not to not to need the healer or the coach or whatever, but it is nice to have someone to do the work with and to help you get past the subconscious stuff, because so much of our belief system is subconscious. And I always say you can't work with what you can't see. And whenever you find a trigger or find a trauma that you were previously unaware was running you to, now it's in front of you. So celebrate. You got upset. Great. Look at what upset you and trace it back to its origin so you can release it, right?
Totally.
And then you can
Totally.
reach a new level of freedom.
Yeah. And we've been taught to avoid those uncomfortable emotions, right? Just take a pill, go for a run, watch a movie, take a nap. And sometimes that helps, right? But what I find is that, and it's exciting, right? When we can learn to see ourselves being triggered as a beautiful thing, because in that moment, whatever is hidden or buried is right on the surface. The minute that I'm triggered, it comes screaming up to the top level of my awareness. And that is where the power lies. That's where my choice of authority is. Do I turn towards this and pull it towards me and give it a big old hug and a kiss and welcome it home because it's just part of me anyway? Or do I continue to double down on my fear and denial and avoidance and just push it to the side again and again and again? Either choice is yours. But when you start to see that welcoming those triggers and pulling them close to you is what actually allows them to finally be released, that's when everything changes.
Yeah. And it takes so much energy to keep pushing them away because they're going to come back bigger, because that's the whole point of them being there, is for you to recognize them and release them or integrate them or however you want to view it.
Yeah,
Surrender.
resistance is only good when building muscle. If you want bigger chest, if you want bigger arms, resist away. But if you're trying to release something or diminish its presence in your life, resisting is the last thing to do. The last thing to do.
Yeah, we kind of have it backwards in our thinking. Many people, most people, but that's just society and how we're trained, right?
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Fight it
Yeah,
or resist it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to this conversation of multidimensionality.
Hmm.
And you have kind of a unique way of presenting that we discussed previously. So I'd love to hear your take on how does one in a human body access their multidimensionality?
That is such a good question. And we could do like a 12-part series just on that, right? Like we could talk about that forever. But my perspective and the way that I look at it is, to me, multidimensionality is simply cultivating and nurturing your innate ability to focus in multiple different places at the same time, right? So I can be listening to you and looking at you, but I can also see out of the right corner of my eye this plant right here and this leaf. So I can look at you and I can see you nodding, I can see you engaging, and I can also see this plant moving out of the corner of my eye. That's a very simplistic approach to the idea of multidimensionality, but that's essentially all it is. And I think we have this idea that the dimensions are out there, as if there's some ladder somewhere in the cosmos that I can just climb to get up to the fifth dimension. Well, there is a ladder, but it exists inside. So to me, the realization that multidimensionality is always an inner journey first, then begin with what's already present. And the dimensions that exist right now within every single human, regardless of their level of spiritual adeptness and their ability to connect, is the five senses. Everyone can tune into physical feeling, physical sight, given that they have actual physical sight, physical hearing, taste, smell. We have these five senses. And I can right now, as I'm talking to you, I can focus on my left elbow and I can feel the pressure of the desk underneath my elbow while I'm talking to you. So right now I am actually literally tuning into two different dimensions at once. So that is the simplest way to begin to reactivate these multidimensional connections, is just learning how to listen with the fullness of the physical body. Because we live in a fractal universe. So the experience of me listening and communicating with myself is exactly the same process of listening and communicating with my higher self, of listening, communicating with source. Geometrically, it is the exact same shape. It's just one is micro and one is macro. So I promise you, as you are able to recommand and reconnect your internal listening mechanism, beginning with what's already here, that is what sets the foundation for learning how to be multidimensional with past lives, concurrent lives, future lives, higher self, creator self, whatever. Because I think we have this idea in spiritual circles that, oh God, well, that's great, but I got to spend $1,200. Oh God, well, that's great, but I don't have 3 months to go sit in a yurt. Or, you know, God, that's great, but I work as a CFO of a financial institution. How am I going to be spiritual? So we have this idea that somehow spirituality and these magical things like multidimensionality are only for the select few, when it's not true at all. Someone as myself came as an example, right? Sure, I may have come in with a few extra switches flipped on, but I don't have access to gifts or abilities that everyone doesn't have access to. It's just you decide where you want to focus and what work you want to do, and you begin to move in that direction. So if someone is interested in discovering and reconnecting themselves interdimensional or multidimensionality, just begin with where you are now and learn how to communicate within your body.
Mm, that's so well said. You're really honing in on mindfulness and focus.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I think about it, that's really, you're totally right on. That's what it takes, is first being aware, bringing a greater awareness, and then focusing on that greater awareness of self first. And then what happens, I know for me, like, for instance, I've always been able to hear frequencies that other people don't seem to notice. Like, I'll walk into a room like, what's that? What's that horrible, piercing, high pitch sound? Everyone's like, no.
Yeah.
And they're like, yes, it's there. And they're like, no. And I'm
You're
like, oh, it's
crazy. What
that.
are you
And I can
talking about?
find it,
Yeah.
it's coming from that thing. Let's turn that off. But, so if I were to focus on that though, it's actually a superpower. It can seem like a very uncomfortable thing. But then in my meditation, when I focus on that, I start to pick up other realities, more or less, my guides' voices in whatever way they show up. So it's first noticing what you're experiencing. You might have all kinds of superpowers going on in every moment, and you're just not classifying them that way. And
Yeah.
actually, I think everybody does. Our human bodies are this fascinating technology that picks up so much information all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I mean, we are so magical in these vessels, that what we can create and what we can, draw to us and what we can access. And, it's really, really simple. If people want to know how to practically do it, just pick one sense every single day, pick a different one. And for 5 minutes, just sit or walk around your house or the neighborhood and just say, okay, for the next 5 minutes, I am only going to pay attention to the things that I can see. Okay, the next 5 minutes, I'm only going to pay attention to the things that I can hear, the things that I can smell, the things that I taste. And you just experiment with it, just play with it. And your point is so beautiful, Shayla. Like, my parents are both musicians. They're retired now, but I grew up in a musical family. So my ability to sense pitch, and when it's even just a little bit flat or sharp, like for me, that's like, oh, and most people are like, what? It sounds great. So it's not that it's right or wrong, better or worse. It's just that because I have spent so many years in an environment where pitch and tone is so important, and I had 15 years of music lessons, I just have that skill set more finely honed. It's like a chef is going to be able to taste things that I can't taste when eating soup, right? So all you got to do is start.
Yeah.
All you got
Yeah.
to do, and it's not magical. It's everyone can do it. I
It's
mean, it's
true.
magical, but it's not like, you know what I'm saying.
Mystical.
Right, right.
It's mystical, but we can access it. So that kind of leads into the stories that we tell about ourselves that are self-fulfilling prophecy. And, conscious life creation with the stories that we tell. I have a story to go along with this.
I love that.
It came to mind as you were speaking. So I was at a Paul Selig. Are you familiar with Paul Selig's work?
Mhm.
He's just awesome. But
Yeah.
years ago, I was at one of his seminars with a friend, and my friend had a story that he's not clairvoyant. And he was like, I wish I was clairvoyant. And we were just sitting on break one day, and I'm like, just tell yourself a new story that you are. You totally are. You're just not seeing it.
Mhm.
And he's like, you know what? I think you're right. I'm going to transform that. And sure enough, he started having clairvoyant experiences right after he shifted the story. And it just exemplifies, that belief he'd been telling himself for whatever reason, you're clairvoyant, but I'm not, was just
Right.
a story. It wasn't even true. And
Yeah.
we can transform ourselves just by telling a new story. And I know that's part of your work as well, as far as, conscious life creation and creating our lives out of what we're speaking and saying and visualizing. How do you work with that with people?
That's such a powerful question, and it's such an important part of not only the work that I do, but I think just in general, coming to the realization of the truth of who we are. Because, the way that I look at it is most of our beliefs, and again, when I think of belief and story, to me, that's the mental plane. Most of our beliefs are inherited or adopted. Like, if we really think about it, the majority of the stories we tell, we never deliberately, consciously sat down and wrote. An example that I love to use and how story can create our reality is, love and relationship. So what, you're 6, 7 years old, let's just imagine, and your Aunt Betty, who is your favorite aunt, she's been really unlucky in love, but you don't know this because you're 6 years old. And so her perspective is that men are dogs, love is for suckers, and you're only going to get hurt in a relationship no matter what. So that's her perception on love. And so maybe you're talking to your Aunt Betty one day and you're like, oh, I have a crush on that person over there. And she says, oh, well, Shayla, I'm going to tell you right now, men are dogs, love is for suckers. And if you want to stay safe and happy in your life, don't ever fall in love. Right? It's just a moment. It's just a conversation. And her intention is probably not to ruin your love life for the next, 30 years. But fast forward to you in your mid-20s, you're single, and that belief is happening, right? It is running subconsciously. Men are dogs, love is for suckers. You're only going to get hurt. Men are dogs, love is for suckers. You're only going to get hurt. You may want to be in a relationship with every single fiber of your being, and you cannot for the life of you decide why you cannot meet somebody to build a relationship with. It's because on some level, love is for suckers, all men are dogs, and you're only going to get hurt. So this running subconsciously is like a radio in the attic that's been running at, the number one volume since you were 6 years old. So you're not even aware that there's even a radio in the house. So this is a dramatic example, but that's essentially what it is. We run these stories on a loop, and Joe Dispenza, he talks a lot about this work in his Becoming Supernatural. about how the body and the mind have their own separate intelligence. But over time, the mind is the record player playing the song over and over and over. And finally, the body, after a while, just says, I can't compete with that. So then the body becomes the mind. So now the body is believing what the mind is telling me, and the mind is telling me all men are dogs, love is for suckers, you're going to get hurt. So now it's vibrating in my body. Now it's a part of my energy field, and the most gorgeous, perfect man in the world could be standing right next to me, but the emanation and my frequency is all men are dogs, love is for suckers, and I'm only going to get hurt. He could be literally standing me in the face saying, I love you. But I would not be able to see him because the story in my mind creates a reality where love is just not an option.
Yeah, exactly. It's a filter and it's a frequency, and you can't, and it's your perception. So even if you did see that person or you heard them say, I love you, you're going to think, well, that's not true. He's a liar.
Right. And there's been work done. I always quote this study when talking about this, so I should probably look this study up so I can credit it. But there was a gentleman in the East Coast at a university who his work was a lot about mental perception. And what he has found is the mind actually spends more energy denying and deleting information that doesn't line up with our narrative than it does accepting it. And he has proven this through this experiment where he'll have his students watch a film. It's like 5 minutes of two teams throwing a ball back and forth. And he tells his students, okay, your job is to watch this video and count the number of times the ball is thrown back and forth. So the mind has its intention, the mind has its rule and its story of what it's going to do. They watch the video. Then after the video, he says, okay, how many times did they throw the ball? And they go 75 or whatever. He says, okay, now how many times did the gorilla walk back and forth? And they go, what are you talking about, gorilla? He plays the film again. The whole time there's a guy in a gorilla mascot uniform walking back and forth on the camera, on the field, but nobody sees it because the story that the mind is telling has nothing to do with a gorilla existing there. So the mind is already expecting what it's going to find. And when I'm living to that story, through that story, that's like looking through the keyhole, thinking that I see the whole room, and I will never be the wiser that there was ever a gorilla on the field if I'm living in the story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard of that study before. And also, but if he had said from the beginning, tell me when you see the gorilla, and they never even noticed,
Yeah.
the ball.
That's what they would have seen. And then he would have said, how many times did they throw the ball back and forth? They said,
ball?
What ball? So the point of that is just to say that, and it's not to bash the mind. I think the mind and the ego gets a really bad rap in our spiritual circles. And I am not one to say, kill the ego, because you can't be human and not have an ego. It's part of the deal. It's like you can't be human and not have a body. Like the two go hand in hand. The point is to begin to renegotiate your relationship with these parts of yourself. The trick is to remind them and to retrain them and program them to know that I'm the CEO here as the authority in my life, and I need my mind. My mind is a valuable, crucial advisor, but he's not the one driving the bus anymore. So it's really using that understanding to realize, and this kind of goes in hand with the multidimensionality piece. Once you kind of realize that the mind is literally like this much of the experience, it's sort of like, that's the last thing I'm going to pay attention to is what my mind is saying. Because the mind isn't the visionary or the genius. The mind is just the computer processing the information that it thinks it needs to process. So, it's like trying to make the data processor the CFO of the company. He's just not, what? I'm not good. How can I know how to run a company, right? I'm just the machine. So yeah, that story, at first, it can seem so daunting and overwhelming to look at that. Like, how do I overcome that? You just gently start to call that part of you that's telling the story into the room. That's it. Like, okay, that part of me that thinks that men are dogs and love is for suckers. Come here, honey, talk to me. What's that about? Ever since you were 6 years old, you've been telling this story. And I know that you don't believe that, because I know you want to be in love. So let's reconcile that. So that's how we begin that process of reconciling with ourselves, is pull that self close to you. Just like fractal expression, your creator self is always holding you close.
Beautiful. Yes. And it is, it's taking that focus. The mind needs a job. And so it's giving the mind the right job to do versus letting it go rogue and try and run the whole business.
I love that. Go rogue. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah, which, that's what a lot of us do all the time, where we're cycling fear and, chaos and negativity, where whatever comes in our bubble,
Yeah.
I'm diligent about my bubble and holding my sacred space, because I don't watch the news. I don't watch any kind of horror shows or, anything, because it affects me, and it always has. It's always, I just have to be protective of my space and my mind, because it will take something and run when I'm not being diligent.
It totally will.
um,
Yep.
so, and to know that we can create a new story once, especially once, and well, we can create a new story before we become aware of those old programs, but that won't do any good, because they'll just negate each other and they'll just kind of neutralize each other. But if we can become aware of that old program and then work with it and say, okay, you know what, that's not serving my highest good, because I do want to have a relationship, and then let it go, and then bring in the new program, and practice that, because we've been practicing that other program since we were a child. So it might take more than one try. Don't expect it to work the first time, but practice that
Yeah.
new program, that new story you're telling, as if it is true. And then you're able to create that new result based on your releasing that old program and allowing that new one in. And I love that you mentioned Dr. Joe. I've been a student of Dr. Joe's work since 2014. So I love
It's
his work.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. It just opens up a whole new layer. And the amazing thing that I loved, and I just recently started reading Becoming Supernatural. It was my first time really
Mm.
following his work closely. I love that he is coming from the science. It's like we meet in the middle, spirit here, science here, and eventually we're almost to that point where we realize we're talking about the same thing. We're just looking at a different side of the coin. And I love that he talks about spiritual concepts without using really a spiritual language. So you see that, oh, we're just talking about the exact same thing. We're just
Yeah.
coming at it from a different layer.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was, especially when I began his work. I don't care about the science personally. I'm all about the woo. But
Yeah,
but I don't need, a lot of people love that science part. I'm interested in it, but I don't feel like I need it. But
right.
I never once heard him say the word chakra. He would say energy centers,
Mhm.
because you can measure scientifically an energy center. But now in the last few years, I've heard him say the word chakra a few times. I
Yeah.
think he's given up, and he talks about beings in the room when we're meditating and things like that. He
Yeah,
didn't used to say that stuff out loud, but
that's funny.
I think he's been aware of it for quite some time.
Right.
But he's kind of gotten past that point of caring what the rest of science says
Yeah.
about his work, I think.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you have to come out of the closet eventually, right? At some point, you just have to decide, I just can't care anymore what other people think. I just can't, because that stands in the way of me doing my work.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you said that. I mean, that is really how we self-actualize, how we step into our mastery is I think it's being courageously willing to be ourselves, to
Yeah.
just truly express who we are weird, like however weird you are. I mean, when I first came out about being an ET contactee, about my interaction with multidimensional beings publicly. I cried the first time I shared that publicly, because I was terrified that, people wouldn't like me. I'd
Yeah.
be whatever, cast out, shunned.
Rejected. Yeah, exactly. Ostracized from
Yeah.
society. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
now it's
scary.
like,
It does.
it's the topic of my summit.
Right now, when we finally let I call it the freak flag. And when you finally let your freak
Yes.
flag fly, you see, number one, everyone has a freak flag. It's just some of us are hiding it better than others. And number two, that's how your tribe finds you. When you're waving your colors, they go, oh my God, those are my weirdos. Those are the people that I belong with. So I get it. It's scary, but the thing is we all have that same fear. We all have the fear of being left out. We all have the fear of being excluded, of not being included and accepted, because we all crave that human connection. We want that tribe. But I promise you, there is a tribe for you, but they're never going to find you until you let yourself be seen. So let those colors fly and they will find you. And
Absolutely.
you'll find yourself.
Yes, beautifully said. You'll find yourself, and in the finding of yourself and letting
Oh,
yourself be who you are, the people come
yeah,
and
and
community
everything else is
happens.
Yeah, it's just gravy, right? Like when you finally say, okay, and when we're talking about, these aspects of self and how to integrate these, I've gone beyond, I think, this idea of needing to heal something or fix something or reconcile something. And I've gone back to, I've just settled on this idea of remembrance. You're not blocked. It's just part of you don't remember yet. You're not afraid, really. It's just part of you that you don't recognize is coming home, and it feels a little weird and scary because this feels like a stranger. So you're not healing or fixing yourself. You're just remembering yourself. You're just reuniting with yourself. You're calling and allowing all that you are to be in the room. I've been thinking a lot about lately, talking about the alchemy of ascension and how do we transcend this duality and this polarity of this 3D world. Well, what I have found is the only way you can ever transcend anything is by finding the middle, right? And the only way I can find the middle is by finding the boundaries. So I have to go to the depths of my dark, scary self. I have to go to the heights of my bright, beautiful self and accept it all. And that immediately is when I become the fulcrum of my experience, the eye of the storm, and pop, that's when we begin to just transcend this polarity. So it's ironic that the very thing that we can do to expand ourselves beyond this experience is the very thing that we are so terrified of.
Yeah.
Right? To really look at the self and say, yep, that is me. And within the context of my soul's experience, I have been the dark, nasty, evil villain. I have been the bright, beautiful hero, heroine here to save the day. And I've been the regular Joe on the street. I've been all of it. So when you accept that, that's when you see that you can leave it all behind, right? The only way I'm ever going to move beyond it is by accepting it all and saying, yep, beautiful, tie it up in a bow. I love it all. I accept it all. Pop, there we go.
Tie it up in a bow. I love it. Oh my gosh, you said that beautifully. And I was having this vision as you were speaking about this story. My son, he's 11 now, but he was probably 4 years old. And 4-year-olds are so open, and just this angelic, wonderful little guy. And he was peeling bark off a tree at my parents' house. And the neighbor came over and said, "Oh, don't peel the bark off the tree. You're killing the tree." And this sweet little boy looked at the neighbor and said, looked at the bark and looked at the tree and said, "Yeah, I'm a tree killer." And I was just like, way to own your bad self. It shocked me.
It's hilarious. And that is so true, right? Like anyone who raises their hand and says, I've only ever been an angel of love and light, you're full of it. It's just not true. We've all had, the soul craves those experiences. And that, I think, is the hardest thing for us to reconcile, to look into a 4-year-old and go, yep, I'm a tree killer. What?
And
the soul is like,
yeah. I know,
yep.
as a mom, I'm like, don't tell my son that's a terrible program. It's going to traumatize him for life. And he's like, yeah, that's me.
Yep.
I found that.
Killed it. Hilarious.
Howard, he's like, yeah, okay.
And immediately, what did he do? He took the power away from that judgment. You're killing the tree. Yep, I sure am. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, carry on.
Yeah, right. And when human nature, I think, is to take that information and be like, oh crap, something's wrong with me. I got to hide that. I got to stuff that down and make sure nobody ever sees that again. Like I just let somebody see something bad or wrong about me. The stories we tell make up our filters. Yeah. Yeah.
You really do. Yeah. And if you don't, and that's the beautiful thing, is that beliefs are disposable, right? So if I don't like the reality I'm living in, all I have to do is lovingly turn to question my beliefs. And, I often feel pushback when I offer that example to people, and my follow-up is like, well, then let's talk about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Right? There was a time for most of us when that was true without a doubt. We're running downstairs every Christmas morning, or we're looking under the pillow for the tooth fairy or whatever, the basket of Easter eggs, whatever that belief is. And until you're 5, 6, 7, and someone tells you the truth that it's your parents or whatever. But in those moments, it is real. It is real. And the magic is real. So beliefs are disposable, and you can decide to change them like you change your shoes if you want to.
Yeah. And that's very empowering to know that we have access to, and everything, every memory, every thought, it's stored in us, it's in our DNA, and we can bring that up and find it and look it in the face and be like, you know what? I don't I don't think you're serving my highest good. I'm going to let you go now.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And I think it's, and we're seeing this a lot right now with a lot of the conversations that the planet is having about like race and racial equality. And this is a perfect example. You're not responsible for your programming. If you're finding yourself with these racist beliefs or these beliefs that limit you or hinder another group of people, you're not responsible for that, right? Just like the example of Aunt Betty telling you at 6 years old that men are dogs, like you're not, I can't point my finger at 6-year-old you and say, see, it's your fault you believe that. No, you just, what do you know? So, but we're at this point now where we are so supported in taking accountability and responsibility for unboxing and unraveling these toxic beliefs. When we can really say like, okay, I have this belief. A, do I really believe that it's true? Does it feel good within my body when I operate under this belief? Does my body say, yes, this is true, or no? So that's where the responsibility and accountability lies, is you can start making those changes now. And all you have to do is just lovingly turn towards yourself. And just, if it helps you to have a story, just imagine you're going into couples counseling with yourself. And so one by one, you're going to pull these aspects of yourself into the room and you're going to reconcile it. That's it.
Yeah. And I think this time in particular on the planet is just, it's just giving us so much opportunity to do that very thing, to look at the societal programming, look where our beliefs have come from and say, I think two things generally happen with people. Either they accept what they've been fed by society because we've been immersed in it, or they rebel against it. A lot of us are rebellious. And so, but either way, we're still either accepting or rebelling, right? We're not choosing for ourselves. And it shouldn't be either or. It's what if, and I think this is a time for that, where the societies, everything's up in there, everything's different, everything's changing, even schools. Like, are we going back to school? All this crazy stuff is happening in the world, and it gives us an opportunity to reevaluate all of those societal things that we've been told.
Yeah. And we're at that threshold now, individually and collectively, where we get to consciously decide what we're taking with us on the next chapter. So if you don't want to if you don't want to take those funky, heavy, tangled beliefs with you, then sit down and unravel them now. So you don't, because energetically, this is the other thing, we are supported in rapid transformation. Like right now is a time where, man, if you've been avoiding doing your work, start it now, because I don't know that we're going to have another moment like we have right now where you can go through years of trauma. And I mean, it can be so quick and so almost instant if people are willing, but you have to be willing to be curious. You have to, that's the only way.
So true. I love that. And I think that's a perfect segue into, but how can I start?
Yes.
and I want to share with people that you have this wonderful free gift that you're giving the viewers. And this gift is worth $120. Well, it's invaluable actually, but that's the retail price. And it's free, that you're giving all the viewers. It's 4 sound healing audios. And they are balance and integration, forgiveness, surrender and release, and high heart activation sound healing files. Would you tell us more about those?
Yeah, so the sound healing is something that I don't do as much anymore, because it's now sort of evolved into the sphere healing thing, which is more of an internal thing for the person. But the sound healing is something that I did for a long, long time. It kind of spontaneously just erupted one day in 2016 during a session when I was just getting the prompt to make these tones. And so what I have are these sound healing MP3s that each intention is in the title, right? So it's balance and integration, to help you find that balance, to also help you integrate a lot of the energies that maybe we haven't taken the time to integrate. Because, right now we're in a really big powerhouse moment. So some of us have sort of a backlog or a catalog of stuff that's waiting to sort of sort itself. So that's the beautiful thing with these MP3s, is they follow you. So what you need to balance and integrate now is going to be different than a year from now, but you can still listen a year from now and still use it to balance and integrate. So there's high heart, which is the high heart activation, forgiveness, which is a huge one for us right now, forgiving ourselves, forgiving the collective, And then surrender and release, just surrendering to the self and releasing everything that's in the way of that relationship. So they're about 15 to 20 minutes each. It's me offering prompts, and then the toning and the sounds are the carriers for these vibrations and frequencies. So it's sort of like a sound bath, sort of an energy massage. And these four are four of my favorite ones. And I feel collectively these are the four that are the most needed right now. So I'm happy to offer these to everybody.
Wow. Thank you for your generosity. That I know those are amazing, and I can't wait to listen for myself.
Yes.
And I will make, I mean, just anybody that's listening, if you are resonating with the conversation at all and with Andrew, be sure and grab that. And I'm going to have his email address attached to the speaker page, so you can email him with the line free gift, and then in the subject, and then he will send you access to get those downloads. And then you have another amazing offer. Where did I write it down? Here we go. 12 Days of Light, which retails for $111 on your website, and you're giving it to the viewers of Alchemy of Ascension for 50% off, and which is wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And tell us about 12 Days of Light.
I love this. This was something that I started at the beginning of the year. What I really wanted was a way that people could do the work on their own. You know, I do a lot of one-on-one work. I do a lot of group work as well. And I understand that sometimes, especially in the beginning of your journey, you don't want to be in a group with other people. Even if it's online, you just feel more comfortable just doing it on your own, consuming it in your own way, in your own time. And that's what the 12 Days of Light is. So it's 12 days. Each day is an individual sound healing file focused on what the intention is for that day, as well as some focus work to help to integrate, to help to really ground the lesson or the knowing into the body. So it comes with a sound healing file and then a PDF for each day. So you get like a worksheet with each day. The beautiful thing is that it is 12 days. And the way that I encourage people to do it is to do all 12 days consecutively. Give yourself a couple of days in between to integrate. Like some people have done it, you know, one every 2 or 3 days. Some people have done once a week. So they have expanded it and made it 12 weeks of light. But essentially, it's you connecting with yourself. The 12 Days of Light, in hindsight, I see, was sort of the precursor to the sphere healing. And that what this program does is gives you a front row experience with yourself to really merge and unify. Some of the topics that we cover are, let me put on my glasses. Some of the topics we cover are the void, feminine receptive energy, masculine assertive energy, action and choice, inspiration, surrender, grief, flow. So we're touching on a wide range of topics, and all of them have their own frequency and signature. So what I tell people is do the 12 days first, and then go back. And the ones that you really felt tension with, or that really excited you, investigate those more fully, dive into those more deeply. So you can make this as deep and as extensive as you want, or quick and brief. That's the beauty of this 12 Days of Light, is it can be whatever you want it to be. And it's a beautiful program. I absolutely love this program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, for your generosity. I'll have the link and the coupon code attached to the page. Anybody that, you know, heard that and is like, yes, that's for me, jump on that, go get that. And do know that that will be only available during the summit. So after, you know, make sure you get it while the summit is live. And with that, we are out of time. But oh, wow, this has been such a delightful conversation.
I love this, Washayla. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for, you know, all that you shared, for who you're being, the work you're doing in the world, and your generosity with the viewers. And with that, I just want to say to everyone, thank you for viewing. Thank you for being a part of this community and for sharing these conversations. And we are all on this ascension journey together. Thank you for being here and just sharing yourselves. And oh, also there's a Facebook page. So whatever you want to talk about or share about that you found interesting in this conversation, comment in the Facebook page and I'll go in and answer you and contribute to that conversation. So with that, thank you again, Andrew, and namaste.
Bye, everybody.